this for a living. You know, when you applaud, it's sort of like, thanks for coming to work. It's like, it's okay. Let's do this.
Wireless mic or?
I'll take it. I'm a walker. You know that. Okay. Boom. Thanks. Good morning. Yeah, I was just messing with you about the don't applaud thing.
There's seats down here. Those of you are standing. I mean, we have plenty of seats, and they don't cost any extra. It's the same price.
Sorry about that. Oh, I love a warm mic. Thank you. All right. So, my name is Dejan. I'm the North American Print Creative Director. Okay, we all set? Got your seat warm? Coffee? Biscuit? Listen, if you can't have fun up here, don't do it, right? Yeah. Exactly, oh my God. So, last year I had the privilege of presenting a body of work, research, and it was well received, and Samir had asked, could you elaborate? And let me just as a preface say this. I work for a paper mill. I'm the creative director, and I have a long history as an art director, creative director in Chicago. My dad owned an advertising agency. I was actually an art director and a stylist for the magazine industry in Chicago for a long time, until I really decided I wanted to work for a paper mill. So, I'm privileged to work for a company that while we are a manufacturer, the fact is that our executives are extraordinarily committed to research. We do take quite a bit of our profit and we reinvest it into our industry by bringing in some of the very top minds and posing questions. So, perfect example, in 2004, I've been with Sappi for 20 years. In 2004, we had just come out of the dot-com revolution. We had just spent $7 trillion establishing what was to become the World Wide Web. And all of us were just enamored with the technology. We were like, oh, this is so cool. But nobody was asking the larger question of what is the ramification of technology going to be on our industry? I'm a designer by trade. How is it going to impact design? How is it going to impact publishing? How is it going to impact the print industry? We weren't asking those questions. So we brought in some of the very top minds, research minds, market research minds, and we said, let's talk about this, and let's see what we can anticipate. What's going to be the positive? What are going to be the challenges? And it ended up being a piece called Life with Print. It was a $2 million research project that ended up becoming basically a wonderful white paper that set a tone, but it had an ellipsis. It was sort of a dot, dot, dot. We're in the midst of it. We don't know where it's going. We'll keep you posted. And we did. Every year we started printing new research on direct mail, catalog, magazine, corporate collateral, etc. And then we decided that we wanted to do sort of a wrap-up. And the wrap-up ended up being a piece called Print and between us, this was supposed to be a 6-month market research project, sort of state of the industry. We brought in again some of the better minds, research minds available to us in North America. And we said, we want you to go out and we want you to do this research. We want you to use 2 demographics. We want to use an age demographic and we want to use an income graph. And they started coming back. Please understand, we were doing this, when we started this research in 2012. This is at the height of print is dead. Okay? By the way, sidebar. If you don't know me, I love sidebar. Sidebar. Did any of you mourn?
Constantly.
I know. When I was oh, it's like print is dead. Let me put it this way. The reason I say this very tongue-in-cheek is that I work for a multi-billion-dollar paper mill. And at the height of print is dead, I was pumping out paper like it was crazy. People were buying it, we were printing. And there was this disconnect. And I'm saying this to you for a reason, because I'm going to ask a sort of rhetorical question, which is, who profits from starting a rumor like print is dead? And I'm leading you because this is, we're going to have a two-part conversation. This being print and then digital. So, I wish I had the time to do this for you. Print Band was ended up being an 18-month market research project. We ended up touring it for about a year and a half. It was a white paper that really won a lot of recognition because it was, in fact, one of the very best state-of-the-industry white papers that was looking at what's happening in our industry. How has technology impacted us since 2004? But the reason I bring this up was, during this project, I came upon a white paper that literally changed my path as an academic. I'm a designer. I'm the first one to say I'm a graphic designer, I'm a creative director. I love that my career has taken me into the academics and doing this kind of research. We came upon this research project done in 2009 by Millward Brown. And it asked this basic question, which is, after 10 years, is content just content? And there was a wonderful conversation yesterday about content. Is it just content? But the fact of it is, we started asking a question that was really, I think, profound. Does the way that we take content in change if we take it and read it ink on paper versus taking it on a device? So Millward Brown brought in a panel of neuroscientists and a very large control, and they used an fMRI scanner, the shower cat, if you will, brain scan, and they had the volunteers read content ink on paper and scan their brain. They had them also read it on a tablet, and then they had the content read to them to sort of simulate what we would consider passive communication, that is radio, television, that for our conversation we're going to put the passive aside. They did the brain scans, they looked at them for comparison, and as you can imagine, there was a lot of similarities, ocular activity, synapse jumping, all that, but what they did notice was that in the brain scan when we were reading ink on paper was all this activity in the back of the brain in an area sort of where you wear headsets. And the panel asks the neuroscientists, what's this difference? The neuroscientists didn't even blink. They said, well, those are all the other senses that are being stimulated when you read ink and paper that are not stimulated when you read on a device. Let me give you basically the end of the report. When you read on a device, phone, tablet, you're only stimulating two senses. Visual, and if it's video, auditory, but otherwise, that's it. You know, one of the things that we know is once you get used to the weight and the feel of, let's say, your phone, it becomes a monolith. It's glass. So you're doing this. It's not that you know where you are, it is that you see where you are. But what I want to share with you is that, in fact, because you get so used to this, the device does not add anything whatsoever to the reader experience. Okay? as opposed to when you read ink on paper, what they discovered is that we stimulate four senses. Obviously the sense of sight, which we do exceedingly well as printing has evolved. I mean, foil stamping, die cutting, embossing, debossing, all these wonderful visuals. I mean, we can do extraordinary things with color and print, and we're really good at it. It is also haptics, the sense of touch, the weight of the paper, the feel of the paper, the stiffness of the paper, the coatings that we can put on it, soft touch, sandpaper, etc. I mean, these have become so important, in fact, that we are starting to incorporate that as a part of the brand. When I go through my mail and I feel grit on a magazine, I know that it's either going to be Wired or Fast Company because they do every cover that way. They're saying, we want you to be able to physically know that it's us. Okay. I had the privilege of doing a lot of paper and print shows, and I can absolutely recognize a print piece from across the room. In fact, I saw a lot of that this morning. Okay, at the table with these extraordinary samples. People were coming up to the table, they're grabbing the samples, and you can feel it, and they're looking at it, they're having, and then when no one's looking, what do? They go in, they take this big hit, they come out, they're a little glassy-eyed, they go into another world. We love the smell of ink on paper. And I would tell you, stop and think about it this way. Two ways. First of all, we are a recording machine. Humans, from the time we are born, we are recording everything. You know the smell. If I were to ask you to close your eyes, you know the smell of newsprint as it differs to a paperback book. Does that make sense? If I were to ask you to close your eyes, and I would say, please recreate the smell of a library. Recreate the smell of a bookstore. You can do it like that. You've logged it. It's important. And lastly, it's the sound of paper. It is how the crinkle of newsprint, or the way that the sound of a book sounds, or a stiff business card. My point is this: we're stimulating four senses, and what the report ended up saying is the more senses that we stimulate, the more we engage the reader. The more we engage the reader, the more they will remember our product or our brand or our content. And ultimately, we really want to understand that content is not just content. The delivery system, the reader experience becomes extraordinarily important. You take one of those senses out, and you create this tension. And what we came to realize was, yeah, interestingly enough, when we look at it, it does change. So this actually ended up, all of this research, interestingly enough, ended up becoming an article that was printed in Scientific American called Why the Brand Prefers Paper. Okay? It was one of the very first pieces of research that started coming out where we were starting to understand the dichotomy of reading and the dichotomy of the way that we were taking in content and information in a world where we do have 5 devices, in a world where we are surrounded by magazines and catalogs and books and things, and we have to make choices because we only have a certain amount of time. We decided to take this research one step farther, and we ended up looking at this in a way that really was important to us. And in your bags, all of you hopefully have a copy of the haptics book. This was actually this is really an important piece of work. This set us on a path where we started doing far more research. And I need to share one piece of research with you that I think is probably was the biggest aha moment. And it's a book called Proust and the Squid. Strange name. The book explains what the first of all, Proust, the writer, Madeleine's hero. And it's written by Dr. Mary Ann Wolfe, who is the head of neuroscience at Tufts. And she posited in this book a completely new theory that was so profound. It's been very much a part of my conversation, particularly as I consult corporations and advertisers and advertising agencies throughout North America. And she posits this whole concept of bilateral literacy. And what she says, she has a neuroscientific lab at Tufts, and they're constantly doing research. And what she said was this. She also used fMRI, volunteers, and she said this, which was amazing. She posits that in the last 15, possibly 20 years, as a society, we have in fact created a secondary synaptical area in our brain that occurs when we turn on the device. She's actually proven this. And what she said is this. When we're reading ink on paper, physiologically, the first thing that happens is that your heart rate goes down, your blood pressure goes down, you slow down. Which in this time is extraordinarily important because we have been moving faster and faster at an exponential pace based on our lifestyle. So the other thing that happens is that the reader slows down enough to be able to read or try to read all of the words. They read for content and context and nuance. They seek the narrative. They're looking for the story. And because of that, they end up having this deep content appreciation. Interestingly enough, what they found out was when we read ink on paper, we read more in depth. We have a longer mnemonic retention. And more interestingly, we have a better understanding. And because we know that print costs money, it's expensive. Subliminally, we know that whoever is putting out print truly values the content. The articles in a magazine, the content in a catalog, the copy of a book. We value the authorship. And we ultimately, if it is a commercial piece, we value the brand, we value the company. What was interesting, and this was the aha moment that I really want to share with you, what she said. This bilateral literacy is as soon as we open a device, whether it's a laptop or it's your smartphone or it's a tablet, you know that there's this tsunami of content waiting for you. It's like hundreds of emails and tweets and Facebook posts and Instagram and all this wonderful content. It's got value. But the amount of content has become so enormous that we understand that the only way that we can get through this is, in fact, we've got to push hard. And when she found out, we immediately go into the skim mode. Does that make sense? We look at the keywords, we skim, we literally will look for one thing more than anything else, and this is a track that's happening right now from a societal level, is we look for the link to the video. We love it. We all grew up on television, movies. So the fact of it is, as one author said, which I totally agree, why do we love YouTube so much? And they predict, in fact, that YouTube, within 3 to 4 years, will be larger than Facebook, at 2 billion members. Why do we love YouTube so much? In fact, because we would much rather have somebody show us how to do it than actually have to read the instructions. And if we don't like that version, there's probably 100 different versions of the same instructions. More importantly, if I want it in French, if I want it in Spanish, if I want it in different languages, it's available. YouTube is becoming the largest repository of content globally, and we need to be able to appreciate that. And we can link it from print using augmented reality, QR codes, etc. But my point is this. What happens is we immediately switch over. We start to skim. What I want you to realize is We read for speed. We want to push things through. We're not reading in depth. And here's the interesting thing. It's totally appropriate. Some things you just want to get the information, you just want to get the data, and you want to move on. But if I'm an advertiser, or if I'm an author, I want you to take the time and savor what I have written. So we ended up putting this book out with Dr. David Eagleman, who is considered one of the top neuroscientists in North America, along with Lana Rigsby from Rigsby Hull. And what's important about this book is this. Please, I've been doing augmented reality now for 10 years. And, I've championed this for a long time in all of my books. What I want you to know is this. When you get the book, if you would, all the pages that have got that silver border, if you would please download the app Layer, L-A-Y-A-R, it's an augmented reality app. And with the app on, it's going to turn your phone into what looks like your camera. You can see through it. Look through it so that you can see the silver border, tap the screen, and it will launch a video. There are 6 videos of Dr. Eagleman. There are 3 case studies in the back of the book, each one with their own video. So this book actually has 9 associated videos that go with it. And as a creative director, I would suggest to you that you are honestly looking at how we need to start addressing content for larger audiences. The use of augmented reality, the ability to get them online is probably the most important disruptive innovation that we have right now in publishing and in printing altogether. So, let me show you Dr. Eagleman, the importance of what he was saying. We wanted to capture for a reason because we don't understand neuroscience well enough. It is the fastest area of research right now, particularly at the university level. And I want to share a couple of the videos with you. So, Eagleman has got a book that was on the bestsellers list, New York bestsellers list, for about 18 months, 22 months. And it talks about the endowment effect. And the endowment effect is incredible because what it says is, as a species, after sort of, food and shelter and everything else, one of the most primary emotions that we have is desire. In its most primitive form, you have something, I want it, I hit you over the head, I take it. Okay? As we evolve intellectually, we can start to intellectualize valuation. If I say something like gold, money, pearls, property, land, you don't have to physically see it, but you know that it has value, and you immediately desire it at the very core. And when I do this presentation, particularly for designers, the first thing I say to them is that when we can trigger the endowment effect through beautiful photography, great visualization, people just lean in and they go, oh, I want that. If you're a good stylist, if you're a good art director, you know how to do it. It's wonderful.
In 2003, the Attorney General's office in Illinois put out a warning to holiday shoppers. They said, don't let companies put something in your hand while you're shopping around because this might lead to unwanted purchases. So what was that about, and why did the Attorney General's office get involved? Well, let's start at the beginning. There's a psychological phenomenon known as the endowment effect. And it means that if I own something, I think it's more valuable than if you own it. So let's say I were to win this coffee mug in a raffle. So I might sell it to you for, let's say, $10 because that's what I really think it's worth. But if you own it, I'm not going to pay more than $6 for it because it's just a coffee mug. So the idea is that things are more valuable if they already belong to us. And this happens to be true across cultures and even across animal species. Even monkeys behave this way. So what does this have to do with touch? Well, it turns out that the endowment effect is so powerful That you don't have to actually own something in order to feel that possessiveness. Just the mere suggestion of ownership is sufficient. Later research found that just imagining owning an object, or even just imagining touching it, was enough to trigger the endowment effect. And once something is yours, you really hate to give it up. This has real-world implications for people who design communications. Researchers at Boston College found out that people have a high sense of ownership when they actually touch and pinch and zoom while they're doing online shopping. It makes them feel like they're physically interacting with an object. And what happens when the medium isn't digital but it's real? Well, there's been an uptick in paper catalogs recently, up to 9 billion last year after an 8-year downhill slide. Many companies were doing really well online, and so they decreased their paper catalogs, and sales decreased. So is that just a coincidence? Well, it's hard to know. But the New York Times quotes an analyst who points out that a company like Land's End is pretty typical of what happened. Their online sales were doing well, so they decreased the number of catalogs they were sending out, and their sales dropped by $100 million. So they picked up their paper catalog sales again, and they did a survey. And what they found was that 75% of the online purchases started by somebody looking in the paper catalog and making a decision and then going online to buy. So the catalogs were actually driving sales. So how do catalogs drive sales? Well, the research suggests that they are enough to drive ownership imagery, that touching a nicely crafted catalog is sufficient to trigger the endowment effect, that somehow the tactile experience of touching a piece of paper is a surrogate for touching the thing itself. So touch ends up being a really important part of our decision making.
You can imagine how thrilled we were when we taped this, right? Because this, I mean, as a consultant, I will tell you, this is one of the largest challenges we have right now in communications. In the graphic arts industry, I do this more from a consultant, where people will call and can you come in and talk to our department, or to our decision makers, because they want to migrate our print budget over to the digital group because that's where all the action is. And we need to better understand this, and I'm going to truncate this just out of respect for time. We brought in experts who wanted to better understand this, and the best way that I can explain it to you is this. Our current business model is called integrated marketing. Most of you know this 360-degree client penetration with as many touch points as possible. So you want some digital, you want some print, you want some out of door, you want everything, because the battle, the challenge is for top of mind. As long as you are top of mind when the buying decision, purchasing decision happens, hopefully it'll be your product, your service. So the interesting thing is, and I'm going to ask you a direct question, which is, what did technology bring to us that we did not have before?
Instantaneous access.
Say it again.
Instantaneous access.
Instantaneous access and distribution, yeah. Unlimited volume. But here's the interesting thing. We had extraordinary access to an extraordinary amount of information before technology. You had to go to a library, or you had to have those references in your home. But you are right. The two things that technology brought to us, and it's very core, they brought us on demand in real time. Does that make sense? I mean, it's simplified, but I'm leading you for a reason, which is when major marketers, advertisers, merchandisers realized how much we appreciated on-demand real time, they started building it into their advertising, into their marketing, into their service packages. And what I want to suggest to you is, I don't think they realized the ramifications, but essentially they ended up creating a consumer society with the anticipation and expectation of immediate gratification. we are a consumer culture predicated on immediate gratification. Here's the interesting thing. We have a statistic and research where we have a number, 84% of online orders were in fact stimulated by magazine advertising, catalog, and direct mail collateral. 84%. We are a culture that loves immediate gratification. If you see something in a magazine that you really, really want, or you see it in a catalog, are you going to fill out the order form and send it in? No. We have been trained. I want it, and I want it now. So what do? We go online. I wrote, in fact, a blog about this, that online ordering will always be the default because now the expectation is that we can have it delivered. Does that make sense? So for us, what we came to realize was we have, over the last 15, 20 years, created this new methodology for the way that we access communication, but more importantly, for the way that we react to communication. That said, Dr. Eagleman took it one step farther in this next video.
We've seen that touch is a necessity. We use it to communicate messages to the outside world and to get information back from there. But a basketball player who's high-fiving a teammate, or the kind of incidental decision swaying that we get from holding a heavy or light clipboard, that's a very different type of communication than what happens when you're deliberately sending a message, like writing a letter, or what a company does when it's trying to communicate something about a brand. And there's a lot of interest lately in how touch influences those kinds of messages. Since the early 90s, there have been more than 100 published studies on people reading on paper versus on a screen. And it turns out that overall what they show is that people prefer reading on paper, and that's because things are more intuitively navigable and you can make a better mental map of where things are. And it's just cognitively easier on you than reading on a screen. And so people tend to enjoy the experience better and they remember more. A recent study in Norway had high schoolers read texts either on paper or online, and they measured comprehension, and comprehension was much better when you were reading on paper. And similarly, in Sweden, they had a bunch of students read things online. What they found is that their levels of stress were higher, and they were also more tired afterward as compared with when they read on paper. When you consider memory, paper looks even better, and that's because when we read online, we tend to go about it a different way where we're hunting and browsing and scanning for things. But on paper, your attention is directed in a different way, and so we have a longer-term memory for what we've read. So while digital devices are great for certain kinds of communication, like sending tweets or getting directions, it turns out that even digital natives have a better experience on paper in terms of comprehending what they're reading and remembering it better. My lab wanted to investigate this a little bit further and ask, does the quality of the paper have anything to do with people's responses? Would a high quality paper lead to more comprehension and better memory? Would people have a different emotional response? And given that the brain uses the same networks when judging people and companies, we wanted to understand whether this haptic communication would influence how people feel about brands. It's a classic question for communicators. How does the medium shape the message? So we brought people in one at a time and we showed them brochures for 3 fictitious companies, a jump rope company, a tea company, and a tech company. The key is that any given participant read about each company either on heavy, high-quality coded paper or lighter, lower-quality uncoated paper or on a website. Which company you see on which medium is totally randomized. So for any given company, the content is the same, including the design and the photography and the typography. The only variable being tested was the medium. So each participant spends about 5 minutes reviewing the material for each company, and then they answer questions about their comprehension and their understanding of what the company is offering. And they also answer questions about their feelings, trustworthiness of the company, the integrity, their likelihood to recommend. We found that when people viewed a company on the high-quality coded paper, they were more likely to have a positive first impression than when they viewed it on the low-quality uncoded paper or on the website. And they were more likely to recommend the company to a friend or a colleague. So it was a first impression, a lasting impression. A week later, we got everyone back. And what we found is that those companies that had been presented on the high-quality coded paper had a higher favorability rating. And people were better able to recall the names of those companies 3-to-1 compared to the low-quality paper or the websites. The company presented on the high-quality coded paper was also the most likely to get rated as having the highest degree of quality. And this is in contrast to the company that was presented on the low-grade uncoded paper, which was the most likely to get rated as raising doubt. So just like with hot coffee or hand warmers or heavy clipboards or comfortable chairs, the quality of paper matters. In my lab study, the high-quality coded paper was the most conducive to building knowledge and fostering positive long-term memories. So our study extends what previous research has shown, which is that the physical nature of paper unconsciously influences our decisions.
I can understand that you would see this being self-serving. But we paid for this research. And let me share something with you. There are no other companies paying for this kind of research, asking this level of question, and really seeing. We didn't know what he was going to say. We didn't know what the research was going to say. But we've taken this knowledge and we're extending it into the packaging industry. How does the package feel when you're grabbing it from the shelf? It is what Procter & Gamble calls the first second of truth. That first time that you actually physically touch the package, does it live up to all of the advertising and marketing that you've seen either on television or in magazine advertising? The other part of it that he said, which is very important, was that it has taken us a cycle of time to understand how to integrate content online into our lives and how to find balance. You hear him say, we are seeing more students, we are seeing more readers coming back to reading ink on paper where they said, yeah, I have access to it, but I'm online, but I really like the feel of a magazine. I really want this. This also begs a larger issue, and if you don't mind, I'm going to sort of little sidebar, but it's very, very important to me about this. And it is the fact that the majority, when I say the majority, 90% plus of the tablets that are in schools now have been donated by the companies that manufacture. It is not that it is necessarily the preference. It is that the Board of Education loves the donation. It's not, we have learned over time, not the optimal way of teaching children. It's taking us time to get to this point, and it is of great concern. Let me share a video from Mary Ann Wolf, who specializes in reading, and I think that this really sort of states it very clearly. It's a short video.
Literacy is the vehicle for all forms of learning. How can we not give our absolute best knowledge to what will bring the potential out of children everywhere? In this moment in time, we are really on the cusp of a change from what would be called the print-driven brain to the digital reading brain. There are challenges and joyful achievements ahead of us, and there are threats. The child who is distracted is not going to read at the same level of focus and concentration as the child of the past. The average child is changing their attention 27 times an hour. Inside the brain, we have to ensure that that child learns how to focus at the deepest level they can to apply their knowledge to the text. To ensure that process, is a very difficult balancing act. So we have as a society to understand what is happening with children who have what's called continuous partial attention. It's not that they can't learn to read very well indeed, but can they learn to read at the level that will give them and us their best concentrated forms of reading? All of us are affected, not only the children. How we read is as important as what we read. And so the future, I believe, from my reckoning of this balancing act that we are all in, every parent is in it as well as every child, is can we learn to provide a foundation for that child so that the formation of what I am calling deep reading is part of the transition, and the knowledge the child takes with them over their development so that they know when to read with depth and concentration and when to read just as you and I do every day, the most surface forms of reading. So that, for me, is the future of a biliterate brain, to know when to do what. But it has to be learned in the beginning for us to be able to switch back and forth. So it's a very important moment in time.
So this is an interesting point, is that how do we teach children to read, deep reading, in depth, and how do we teach them to understand that there is wonderful information and wonderful entertainment available? How do we make the difference? I would share with you that the biggest challenge we have right now is constant distraction. The fact is, I love where it says, we are creating and encouraging a culture of distraction where we are increasingly disconnected from the people and the events around us and increasingly unable to engage in long-form thinking. People now feel anxious when their brains are unstimulated. We do not know how to quiet the noise. And at the same time, when we need to really concentrate deeply, we are surrounded by so much distraction that the fact starts to beg the question, can we? I mean, it is interesting that we are seeing more and more quotes of this nature. Isaac Asimov made a comment in one of his global speeches where he said that he truly believes that the demise of our civilization will be constant distraction. And the fact is, we take this one step further, which is, there's some absolutely superb research happening, because we're talking about paper. There's some absolutely superb research happening right now in the UK on the haptics of handwriting. How important it is for us to be able to write, and what happens, neuroscientifically speaking, as we write, how we ingrain what we are writing in our brain at a deeper level than what happens when we simply type it out and then don't go back. And one of the things that we all learn as good study habits is you take your notes and then you go back and then you rewrite them, or if you type them, you rewrite them, and it gives you that intimate knowledge and intimate feeling. So I wanted to share that with you.
This is the end of publishing, and books are dead and boring. No longer can it be said that we like to read. My friends and I, we don't like the way books feel in our hands. It's not true that I don't follow trends. I know what I want when I see it, and packaging is more important than content. I have to tell you, my attention span is too small for big ideas, and it's just not true that I read a lot and I like learning. I don't care. And you should never think I've got to be concerned with environment and sustainability. What I really hope you get is you've got to open your eyes to my values. What's important to me is what Lady Gaga is wearing, and I don't really care all that much what Gandhi did last century. I think it's unbelievable that you're actually listening to us. What's important for you is you'll find customers for your products. You think your job's done if we like your brand. We'll do it for you on Facebook, on our mobiles, me and my friends. Your market is dying. Don't think it's all going to survive. It is the end of the publishing industry as we know it. Unless you reverse how you see me. It is going to survive. Don't think that it's all dying. Your market is me and my friends. On our mobiles, on Facebook, we'll do it for you. If we like your brand, your job's done. You'll think of products for your customers. You'll find what's important for you is that you're actually listening to us. I think it's unbelievable what Gandhi did last century. And I don't really care all that much what Lady Gaga is wearing. What's important to me is you've got to open your eyes to my values. What I really hope you get is I've got to be concerned with environment and sustainability. And you should never think I don't care. I read a lot and I like learning. And it's just not true that my attention span is too small for big ideas. I have to tell you, content is more important than packaging. I know what I want when I see it, and I don't follow trends. It's not true that we don't like the way books feel in our hands. My friends and I, we like to read. No longer can it be said that books are dead and boring, and this is the end of publishing.
Really depends on how you see it, isn't it? Yeah, a wonderful piece. So, I want to finish with this. I read voraciously, and I came upon this while I was reading, and it astounded me. And it's called Reichel's Law. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share it with you. New further developed types of media never replace the existing modes of media and their usage patterns. Instead, a convergence takes place in their field, leading to a different way and field of use for those older forms. The old doesn't necessarily die out, and in some instances, the old methods are absorbed or recycled into a new form. And in other cases, those methods are refined and distilled down to their essence. And this is really what we're talking about as we're looking at this huge world filled with digital information and print information. And why was I so stunned when I read this was that it was written in 1913. So I called up a few of my friends who are historians, and I said, why is this important? Why is 1913 important? They said, well, stop and think of it. History is cyclical. You have these periods of innovation that happen. In 1913, you now have the automobile. You now have early films. Photography is being used now in publishing. Also, by the way, homes start to get electricity. I mean, this was a revolutionary time. And the one thing I want to share with you is that I asked you a question at the beginning, which is, who benefits from starting a rumor like Print Cat? And it's the fact that we have capital investors who have invested astronomical sums of money in new technology that cannot afford to fail. And it is predicated on the concept that the market is a fixed size. And in order to have new technology, you have to displace the old technology and fit it in, and that's not the truth. The fact of the matter is, the market is incredibly malleable, and you can add new things in, and they will find a way of blending. I mean, I was reminded, and I will remind you, magazines started in the late 1700s. And when radio came out in the late 1800s, we thought that radio was going to replace magazines, but it didn't. In the same way that we thought that movies were going to replace live theater, but it didn't. Or television was going to replace movies, but it didn't. In the same way that we now have streaming on our laptops or on our phones, and everybody thinks that that's going to displace entertainment. It has not. What I want you to appreciate is still all exist. They have expanded the market. They have given us more choice. And each demographic will choose and use that the way they want. So let me close with this. Printing on paper may be centuries old, but it is very much a medium for the new millennium. Advances in both paper and printing technology have allowed marketers to achieve effects that were not possible a decade ago, and on the right paper, print can evoke nearly any texture through various coatings and varnishes, different inks, and special techniques together. Print and digital will enhance the communication needs of the 21st century. I hope that you found this entertaining. Thank you. Please.
I was wondering if y'all are doing any research on how to get someone my age to put down the phone and pick up the magazine, pick up.
The question is, have we done any research about how do we get younger demographics to put down their phone? It is our responsibility to engage you. And I can do that when you feel a magazine or a catalog or a book that it feels so different. I'm engaging your senses. For that moment, you will. I can use that. And the other part of it is, again, one of the things that we've come to realize in our research is, if you know in advance that contained within this printed material are triggers that get you online to videos that will support what you're reading, it's much more entertaining. Look, let me be honest with you. And I'm saying this as a creative director. The biggest challenge we have right now in graphic communication is that we have financial people making aesthetic and marketing decisions. Does that make sense? I mean, I consult here and in Canada, and the fact of the matter is, the magazine industry in Canada really is challenged. And when I say to them, well, are you using special effects on your covers? No. Do you use special links? Fluorescence, stay glow? No. Do you have inserts? No. I'd be like, why aren't you doing these things? These are just engagement techniques. This is not magic. It's engagement techniques. And they say, well, we can't afford that. And I said, so what's going to happen is that you will allow your industry to atrophy into non-existence because you're afraid of spending money. As opposed to all of the examples that we have of exceptional magazines that sell out. I read 60 magazines a month. I get magazines from all over the world, and I will share with you. I have some magazines that will cost me $100 to $125 for only 2 issues, and they're hardcover. And they stay on my coffee table until the next one shows up. They print sometimes hundreds of thousands of issues of pieces, and they sell out every month because they're fabulous. The challenge that we have right now is that the print industry is going in 2 directions because of the financial folks making the decision. We will either commoditize it because we're worried about the cost per unit, or we will truly treat it like the luxury product that it is, make people feel wonderful when they get it. To your point, keep subscribing even though their children have grown up, because the content and what you do is fabulous. You treat it like a luxury. You treat them like they are receiving a luxury product, and they believe they're getting a luxury product. So the fact of it is 2 things. One, which I sort of addressed at the end, if we're not helping children to appreciate the value of print, then we can't expect them to take that into their teen and to their adulthood. We have a responsibility as an industry. And I'm saying things like literacy programs or the American Library Association, or, I mean, there are any number of programs that are doing an extraordinary job to be able to do that. This whole issue of handwriting has become huge for me. As I said, outside of right now, I think there's only 4 states in the United States that still are funding teaching cursive handwriting. And it's like, how can you not teach children cursive handwriting? I was sharing with a friend, my oldest son, or my son, I asked him to sign something, and he signed it, and I looked at him and I said, what's this? And he said, it's my signature. I said, this looks like a gang tag. And he went, yeah. I thought, oh my God. Please don't use my last name.
Linda?
Daniel,
Good.
newspapers today are struggling.
Yeah,
The whole readership and circulation.
yeah.
Apply what you've said and your message to daily newspapers today.
Well, first of all, what we have to understand is national newspapers were the first ones to really take the hit. But I would share with you that what we are seeing is that journalism is becoming focused on a regional and local level. What we have to understand is, let me ask you an honest question. I mean, we're in Oxford, Mississippi. Do any of you really care what's happening nationally? I mean, if you want to, where do you get it? You're going to go to television. You're going to go online. What you care about is what's happening here. You care about Mississippi sports, Mississippi education, Mississippi legislation, Mississippi, everything is about your area. And we do it well. Who was it? I forgot. I'm sorry. We were walking and somebody picked up the Mississippi and picked up and said, you know, the interesting thing is, we don't look at this as newspapers. We just think of this, and younger demographics don't see this as a newspaper. They see this as a communication tool that augments and complements what they're getting on their phone. I would say we need to be very realistic about that and about publishing. I mean, there will come a time, and I believe this sincerely, because I think I've lived long enough and tried to be astute, is things are very cyclical. We do have change. National newspapers are threatened, but I think that regional and local papers, and I have good examples of that in my own town, have a reason for doing well. And we want that kind of news, and we want that kind of information.
Last question.
I love all the neuroscience, and at the MPA we use that, and your magazine that has the hair on
Yes.
the piece of paper is
Yes.
a brilliant example that we use. I want to add 2 points I think might be helpful, because when I talk about neuroscience out in the market, I get a question about, well, younger people's media behavior is different. And neuroscience is not about behavior, it's literally about the physiology of your brain. So everything that was just described isn't any different when behaviors are different, because it's about how your brain is built. And Darwinism is a thing, but your brain is not going to be built differently for many, many, many generations. So this is science, it's really important. The other thing, and you mentioned technology companies paying to fund technology devices in school. I think not just as magazine people, but as citizens, as parents, as people who care, we need to be aware that in Silicon Valley, they don't have that technology in the school. They keep it out.
Right.
Because they know
Right.
how the brain science
Well-
works, and they know what works in school. And that ought to be incredibly alarming to all of us.
To your point, right now, we are seeing for the first time, how long did it take? We are finally seeing, the technology being outed for physically, premeditatively being addictive. Because it is profitable. We didn't think about the long-term ramifications of what it was going to do to our children and to people driving and walking. But the fact is, that we are starting to see more exposés on the fact that these companies have created very premeditatedly a very addictive technology. And now we have the unfortunate job ahead of us. How do we get folks unaddicted and find the balance?
I talk about addiction. I'm addicted to my sponsors, and one of my sponsors said, "Hey, I have a question." I have to, although I said last question. So Jim, go ahead. So then you get sponsors.
I normally have a comment on Sappi is a commercial enterprise, but I commend you because you do industry-wide research. You deep dive into it, and then you share it with the industry.
We have to.
And I think it's fabulous.
We
I
have
wish
to.
Many of us did that.
We have to break down these walls. I mean, we're all in business to stay in business. But the fact is, when I talk to my paper competitors, we don't see each other as competitors anymore. We talk to each other about how do we keep the industry alive and thriving. We don't talk about, we are very, very good friends. And until we understand that we need to adopt that kind of philosophy. If I do my job well, you will buy my paper. But we have an industry to absolutely protect. So, again, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And